About once or twice a month, I have the privilege of driving down Highway 22. I have driven it top to bottom, and I think it's one of the prettiest highways we have in Alberta. And when I drive it, I make notes of where I'd like to stop someday if ever I have the time. Well, 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to stop at a distillery and a meadery. And here's what it looked like inside of the Grey Owl. But better than the mead, I made a third stop that day. There's a road sign between Edmonton and Drayton Valley. On one of those dusty, faded Alberta history signs, I stopped to look at it, and what I read was so interesting that I backtracked to the town of Breton to make this video. I'm in the town of Breton, which used to be called Keystone. It's a tiny place with a surprisingly important role in Alberta history. In 1907, when Oklahoma became an American state, the state legislature there passed several laws that limited the political and other rights of Oklahoma's Black residents. Attracted by the Canadian government's aggressive advertising campaign for homestead lands in Western Canada, many Oklahoma Blacks thought that Canada might prove to be a more tolerant home. In the spring of 1911, there were several families that arrived from Oklahoma and took up homestead in this district, which became known as Keystone. The new immigrants soon discovered that prejudice was found in Canada too. The government took steps to discourage what some feared would become a flood of settlers from Oklahoma. However, Gwen Hooks, a descendant of the Keystone settlers, has noted in her book that after some initial panic, most people settled down and accepted the Black immigrants as friends and neighbors. Despite an unfamiliar environment and harsh conditions, many of the original Black settlers stayed and built distinctive community here. In 1912, they completed the Good Hope Baptist Church, and that log structure became a focal point for the community life. In 1927, the name of the community was changed to Breton with the extension of the railway through this area. Today, the name Keystone is almost forgotten, but the story of this community remains an important part of Alberta's history. The images I showed came from a little museum of Breton, only open during the summer, which is also where I bought the book by Gwen Hooks. I read the book, which I thought was a delightful love letter from Gwen to her departed husband. Gwen's husband had this dream about writing down his family's story, but he had died before he could do it. So Gwen wrote this on his behalf in his voice. Aww. Gwen points out in her book how essential the first church was to their community, his little Good Hope Baptist Church. That church was a focal point for the community life, and it held them together. Homesteading was hard, and it was made even harder for Black homesteaders, and having the support of a church saved lives, spiritually and physically. I asked the museum if the church was still around, and it isn't. It was a log structure, and they're not even sure what street it was on or what it looked like. The only picture of it is a drawing that's made by someone who guessed at what it looked like. It was a church that served a particular community at a particular time. Did it fail because it's not around anymore? Not in the least. It did wonderful work at a time when it was needed most. The village of Breton now has several churches. God is praised there in the community and in the lives of those descended from the Keystone Black settlers. I'm so glad that I stopped by that historic sign. You never know what you'll find when you're out driving in Alberta.